The sun was setting as Special Agent Tom Reynolds checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 6 months of his life had gone into this undercover operation, and tonight might finally deliver the payoff. He adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, no longer seeing himself but instead Jack Bennett, the financial consultant who had slowly wormed his way into one of the most sophisticated money laundering operations on the East Coast. Tom took a deep breath and glanced at the plain manila folder on the passenger seat. Inside were fabricated documents showing how several businesses could funnel cash through offshore accounts, documents that would cement his place in the organization's inner circle. The higher-ups at the Bureau had been getting antsy. 6 months was a long time to maintain a cover, and resources were always stretched thin. He needed this meeting to go well. His phone buzzed with a text from his handler. "All set for tonight? Remember, no wires. They're checking everyone." Tom typed back a quick response with his thumb. "On my way now. Should be there in 40. He tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and merged onto the highway leading out of the city. The Bureau had provided him with a silver sedan, nice enough to suggest success but not flashy enough to draw attention. Just like Jack Bennett himself, Tom had crafted the persona carefully. Divorced, no kids, a bit of a drinker with gambling debts that made him open to opportunities outside the law. The kind of guy who would look the other way for the right price. The further he drove from the city, the darker the road became. Streetlights grew sparse and traffic thinned out. His mind drifted back to how this all started. A routine investigation into tax fraud had uncovered something much bigger. A network that stretched across 3 states, with tentacles reaching into local businesses, real estate, and even city government. The FBI had been trying to crack it for years, but previous attempts to infiltrate had failed. Tom had gotten his break at a charity golf tournament. He'd spent weeks researching his target, Frank Rizzo, learning his habits, his preferences, even how he liked his scotch. Their chance meeting on the 9th hole had been anything but chance. A casual conversation, a business card exchanged, and the hook was set. Small jobs at first. Moving some money around, creating fake invoices, setting up shell companies. Each task a test of his loyalty and skill. Each success earning him a little more trust. And now finally he was being brought to meet the boss. A figure so secretive that even after 6 months, Tom only knew him as the accountant. His GPS directed him to exit the highway. The small town of Millfield appeared ahead, a collection of lights in the darkness. This was unfamiliar territory, and Tom felt the familiar prickle of alertness that came with entering a new situation. He'd memorized the maps, of course. 3 escape routes planned, as always. The meeting point was an old warehouse on the outskirts of town that had once housed a furniture manufacturing business before those jobs went overseas. Tom rolled down the window, letting the cool night air clear his head. The smell of pine and distant wood smoke replaced the city's constant exhaust fumes. In another life, he might have enjoyed a drive like this. Peaceful country roads under a sky full of stars you could never see in the city. His phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. It was Dave, his handler, just checking in. "You good?" Dave's voice always had that calm, measured tone even in the worst situations. "All good. Almost there," Tom replied, keeping his voice steady despite the knot of tension forming in his stomach. "Remember, this guy doesn't meet just anyone. You're being evaluated every second. If anything feels off, I know the drill," Tom cut in. 6 months in, I think I can handle a meeting. Just be careful. These people don't mess around. We've lost 2 informants trying to get close to this operation. Tom knew that all too well. The faces of those who hadn't made it out were part of his nightly mental review, reminders of what was at stake. "I'll check in after," Tom said, ending the call as he turned onto a narrower road. The weight of his backup weapon pressed against his ankle, hidden beneath his pant leg. His service weapon had been left behind months ago, too risky to carry while undercover. The ankle piece was registered under his cover identity, clean and legal just in case he was ever searched. Small comfort, but better than nothing. His mind wandered to his empty apartment back in the city. 6 months of dust gathering on surfaces, mail piling up that someone from the office collected weekly, no pets, no plants. His life had been deliberately simplified before taking this assignment. Less to worry about, fewer connections to maintain. Sometimes he wondered if there'd be anything of Tom Reynolds left when this was all over, or if Jack Bennett would have taken over completely. The road curved around a small lake, that reflected the moon like a mirror. Tom eased off the gas, taking the unfamiliar turns carefully. The last thing he needed was to be pulled over now, so close to the meeting. His documents were in order. The FBI made sure of that, but any delay could raise suspicions. He'd been given strict instructions: arrive alone, leave his phone in the car, submit to being searched. Standard procedure for paranoid criminals. He'd done it all before. The dance was familiar by now. Show enough caution to be credible, but not so much that it suggested fear or, worse, deception. Tom reached for the bottle of water in the cup holder, his mouth suddenly dry. The stakes tonight were higher than usual. If he could get the information they needed, the FBI could move in within weeks. The whole network could come tumbling down, and he could finally go back to being Tom Reynolds. He thought about what that would mean: sleeping in his own bed, using his real name, not having to remember which lies he'd told to which person, simple things that most people took for granted. The GPS announced that his destination was approaching on the right. Tom slowed down, scanning for the turn. Just a small gravel road, easy to miss in the darkness. He spotted it and turned, headlights bouncing off the trees lining the entrance. As the warehouse came into view, Tom took one final moment to center himself. He shut off the part of his brain that was FBI agent Tom Reynolds and fully embraced Jack Bennett. Confident, slightly arrogant, hungry for opportunity and money. He checked his expression in the mirror one last time, erasing any trace of anxiety or doubt. The gravel crunched under the tires as he pulled up to the building. 2 black SUVs were already parked outside. Security lights cast harsh shadows across the loading dock area. A man stepped out of one of the vehicles. One of Rizzo's guys, someone Tom had met briefly before. This was it. 6 months of work coming to a head. Tom grabbed the folder, tucked it under his arm, and stepped out of the car. Time to see if Jack Bennett would finally get his seat at the table. As he walked toward the warehouse, Tom spotted a car parked down the road just at the edge of visibility. Probably nothing, but his instincts flagged it. He made a mental note but kept walking, maintaining his confident stride. In this business, paranoia kept you alive, but showing it got you killed. The guard nodded at him as he approached. "You're right on time, Jack. They're waiting inside." Tom nodded back, straightening his shoulders. "Let's not keep them waiting then." With each step toward the warehouse door, he buried Tom Reynolds deeper and let Jack Bennett take complete control. For the next few hours, that's who he needed to be, completely and convincingly. Lives depended on it, including his own. The heavy metal door swung open, revealing a brightly lit interior that contrasted with the darkness outside. Tom blinked, adjusting to the light, and stepped through the threshold into what would either be his greatest success or his worst mistake. What he didn't know was that his carefully constructed world was about to collide with another force, entirely, one wearing a badge and carrying a chip on his shoulder bigger than his jurisdiction. Officer Brian Kelly drummed his fingers on the steering wheel of his patrol car, parked just off the side road leading to the old furniture warehouse. His shift had been dragging on for what felt like forever, and he was 3 citations short of his monthly quota. Not that there was an official quota, that would be illegal, but everyone on the force knew that anything less than 20 traffic stops a month got you on the sergeant's bad side, sipped his now cold coffee and grimaced. 6 hours into a 10-hour shift, and the highlight had been helping an elderly woman change a flat tire. The small town of Millfield wasn't exactly a hotbed of excitement, which was usually fine by him. But tonight he was itching for something to happen, anything to break the monotony. His radio crackled. "Unit 17, what's your 20? Brian grabbed the handset. "Just off County Road 8 near the old Wilson furniture place." "Copy that." "Anything to report?" "Negative." "All quiet." He paused, then added, "Saw a sedan turn in there about 20 minutes ago. Silver, late model. Probably nothing." There was a brief silence before the dispatcher responded. "Probably just kids looking for a place to party. Keep an eye out." "Will do." Brian set the handset down and straightened in his seat. The old warehouse had been empty for years, occasionally attracting teenagers or homeless people seeking shelter. But a nice sedan didn't fit either scenario. His curiosity piqued, he started the engine. Maybe worth a closer look. As he pulled onto the road, headlights appeared in the distance. The silver sedan was leaving the warehouse already. Brian's pulse quickened. Near 20 minutes was an awfully short time for whatever business brought someone out here this late. He flipped on his lights as the car passed him. The sedan immediately slowed and pulled over, which Brian took as a good sign. At least they weren't running. Tom Reynolds saw the flashing lights in his rearview mirror and felt his stomach drop. This was exactly what he didn't need right now. He pulled over smoothly, mind racing through his options. Jack Bennett's license and registration were spotless. The FBI made sure of that. But any delay or complication could raise suspicions with the people he'd just met. The meeting had gone better than expected. The accountant had been impressed with his financial models, and Tom had been given access to new information, the names of several shell companies that could help unravel the entire operation. He needed to get this information back to his handler as soon as possible. Tom took a deep breath and watched the officer approach in his side mirror. Stay calm, be Jack Bennett. Jack Bennett has nothing to hide. Just a routine traffic stop. Brian approached the vehicle cautiously, flashlight in hand. Standard procedure, even if this didn't feel like a high-risk stop. He shined the light through the rear window, noting the clean interior and single male occupant. No visible red flags. Evening, sir, Brian said, keeping his tone professional but firm. License and registration, please. Tom nodded, reaching slowly for his wallet. Evening, officer. What seems to be the problem? I'll ask the questions, Brian replied, a bit more sharply than necessary. Something about the driver's calm demeanor irritated him. Too smooth, too practiced. You were doing 42 and a 35. Where are you coming from this time of night? Tom handed over his documents. Business meeting that ran late. I'm a financial consultant just passing through. Brian examined the license. Jack Bennett, 38, address in the city. Out-of-towner. He shined his flashlight directly into Tom's face, watching for any reaction. You know there's nothing out here but an abandoned warehouse, right? What kind of business meeting happens there? Tom squinted against the bright light but kept his expression neutral. My client prefers privacy. Some people are like that with their finances. Brian's suspicion deepened. Step out of the vehicle, please. Tom hesitated just for a second. Is that really necessary, officer? It's just a minor speeding ticket, right? I said, step out of the vehicle. Brian's hand moved to rest on his belt near his holster. Now, Tom recognized the escalation and knew arguing would only make things worse. He held up his hands in a placating gesture. Okay, no problem. He opened the door slowly and stepped out, making sure to keep his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The night air was cool against his face as he stood beside his car. Brian was younger than he'd expected, probably early 30s, with the overly rigid posture of someone trying to project authority they weren't entirely comfortable with. Put your hands on the hood, Brian ordered, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Tom complied, spread-eagling against his own car. Officer, I really don't think this is necessary. I was barely over the speed limit. Brian began patting him down, his movements brusque and unprofessional. You know what's suspicious? Well-dressed city types having business meetings in abandoned buildings in the middle of nowhere. Tom felt the officer's hands reach his ankle and pause on the outline of his backup weapon. His heart rate spiked. Well, what do we have here? Brian stepped back, his hand now firmly on his service weapon. You carrying, sir? Yes, I have a licensed firearm, Tom replied calmly. The permit is in my wallet. I'm legally allowed to carry it. Brian's expression hardened. Didn't think to mention that when I pulled you over? That's a serious oversight. I apologize, officer. I should have disclosed that immediately. Damn right you should have. Brian's confidence grew with each passing moment. Something was off about this guy, and he was going to get to the bottom of it. Hands behind your back, excuse me? Tom couldn't believe how quickly this was escalating. You heard me. Hands behind your back. I'm detaining you while I search your vehicle. You don't have probable cause to search my car. Tom knew his rights, both as a citizen and as a law enforcement officer himself. This was crossing the line. Brian stepped closer, invading Tom's personal space. Failure to disclose a weapon gives me all the cause I need. Now turn around or we can add resisting to the charges. Tom weighed his options quickly. Making a scene would only complicate matters. If word got back to Rizzo and his crew that Jack Bennett had been arrested, his cover would be blown. 6 months of work down the drain. But letting this power-tripping officer search his car could be just as disastrous. The folder on the passenger seat contained information that could expose his identity just as effectively. "Officer, I'd like to speak to your supervisor," Tom said, trying a different approach. Brian laughed, a short, humorless sound. "That's not how this works. Last chance. Hands behind your back." Tom turned slowly, his mind racing for a solution. He couldn't let this overzealous cop ruin the entire operation. But he also couldn't risk escalating the situation to violence. As Brian grabbed his wrist to apply handcuffs, Tom made his decision. "Officer Kelly," he said quietly, using the name from the officer's badge. "I need you to listen very carefully. My name isn't Jack Bennett. I'm Special Agent Tom Reynolds with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and I'm working undercover. If you continue with this detention, you'll be interfering with a federal investigation 6 months in the making." Brian froze, the handcuffs dangling from one hand. "Yeah, right. You expect me to believe that? In my left inside jacket pocket, there's a badge and ID. You can check it yourself. But I need you to be discreet about it." Suspicion battled with uncertainty on Brian's face. He stepped back slightly, maintaining his grip on Tom's arm. "No sudden movements. I'm going to check, and if you're lying, I'm not lying." Tom kept his voice steady. "But this situation is more dangerous than you realize. There may be people watching." With his free hand, Brian reached cautiously into Tom's jacket pocket and extracted a small leather wallet. He flipped it open to reveal an FBI badge and identification card. The same face that was on the Jack Bennett driver's license, but with a different name. His eyes widened as the reality of the situation hit him. I didn't," Brian stammered, suddenly unsure of himself. "Put that away," Tom said urgently. "Right now, and let's talk somewhere more private." The cocky demeanor had vanished from Brian's face, replaced by something approaching panic. He quickly tucked the ID back into Tom's pocket and released his grip. "My car," he said, voice now much quieter. "We can talk in my car." As they walked toward the patrol car, Tom noticed headlights in the distance moving slowly along the road that led to the warehouse. His blood ran cold. Someone was coming, and whoever it was couldn't see him having a friendly chat with local law enforcement. The confrontation with Officer Kelly had just become the least of his problems. "Get down," Tom hissed, grabbing Officer Kelly's arm and pulling him behind the patrol car. The approaching headlights cut through the darkness, growing brighter by the second. "What's going on?" Brian whispered, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Those could be associates of the people I just met with," Tom explained quickly. "If they see me with a cop, my cover's blown and we're both in danger. I need you to trust me right now." Brian nodded, the gravity of the situation finally sinking in. "What do we do?" Tom's mind raced through scenarios. "Make it look like a normal traffic stop. Go back to my car and pretend to write me a ticket. I'll act annoyed like any regular person would. Keep your back to the road so they can't see your face clearly." Brian hesitated for just a moment before nodding again. Okay, they moved quickly but naturally. Brian walked back to Tom's sedan, ticket book in hand, while Tom leaned against his car with arms crossed. The perfect picture of an irritated driver. The approaching vehicle, a black SUV with tinted windows, slowed as it passed. Tom kept his expression neutral but frustrated, not acknowledging the SUV in any way. Inside, his heart pounded against his ribs. He recognized the vehicle as belonging to one of Rizzo's security team. Had they followed him? Were they checking up on him? Brian kept writing, his back to the road as instructed. The SUV lingered for what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds before accelerating away. Tom waited until the taillights disappeared around a bend before speaking. "That was close. Too close. Who were they?" Brian asked, his voice low. "Bad people. The kind who wouldn't think twice about killing a cop and an FBI agent if they knew what was happening here." Tom straightened up. "Look, I know you were just doing your job, but I need you to understand what you've stumbled into. Lives are at stake, including yours now." The color drained from Brian's face. "I didn't mean to." "It doesn't matter what you meant to do," Tom cut him off. "What matters is what we do next. I need to make a call and you need to call your supervisor." Brian looked like he'd been slapped. "My supervisor? Are you crazy? I'll lose my job over this." "You might lose a lot more if we don't handle this right," Tom said firmly. "This isn't about a traffic ticket anymore. You've potentially compromised a major federal investigation and those people who just drove by. They kill people who get in their way." The reality of the situation hit Brian like a physical blow. His shoulders slumped as the adrenaline that had been fueling his aggressive behavior drained away. "I was just trying to meet my numbers," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Sarge has been on my case all month about not being proactive enough." Tom's expression softened slightly. He'd seen this before. Pressure from above turning decent cops into problems. "I get it. But right now we need to focus on damage control." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a gruff voice answered. "This better be important. Dave, it's me. We have a situation." Tom kept his voice low, eyes scanning the darkness around them. "I've been pulled over by local PD after the meeting. Officer knows who I am now." There was a pause and then a string of colorful curses from the other end. "Are you compromised?" "Don't think so, but it was close. One of Rizzo's cars drove by during the stop." "Jesus, Tom." Dave sounded like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "All right, what's the officer's name and badge number?" Tom looked at Brian, who supplied the information in a subdued voice. "Officer Brian Kelly, badge 1742, Millfield PD." Tom relayed this to Dave, who promised to make some calls. "Stay put. I'll have someone from the local field office there in 20 minutes. Don't let that officer leave." "Not a problem," Tom replied, ending the call. He turned back to Brian. "Your turn. Call your supervisor." Brian looked like he was being asked to walk the plank. "He's going to kill me." "Better him than the alternatives," Tom said bluntly. "Make the call." With visible reluctance, Brian reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 17. I need to speak with Sergeant Wilson." "It's urgent." A few moments later, a deep voice came through the speaker. "Kelly, what did you do now?" Brian winced. "Sir, I need you to come to my location. There's been a situation with a traffic stop." "What kind of situation?" Brian glanced at Tom, who nodded encouragingly. "It's sensitive, sir. Federal involvement." "I really can't say more over the radio." There was a long pause before the sergeant responded. "I'll be there in 10. Don't do anything else until I arrive." "Yes, sir." Brian set the radio down and leaned against his patrol car, looking utterly defeated. "My career is over." Tom shook his head. "Not necessarily. Your sergeant sounds like he's been around the block. He'll understand the bigger picture here." "You don't know Sergeant Wilson," Brian muttered. "He's old school. By the book. Doesn't tolerate mistakes." "This isn't just a mistake," Tom pointed out. "This is you stumbling into an active federal investigation. That changes things." They fell into an uncomfortable silence, each man lost in his own thoughts. Tom used the time to mentally review the meeting he'd just left. Despite the current complication, he'd gotten what he needed: names, dates, banking details. Enough to potentially bring down the entire operation, if he could just get that information back to the Bureau without further incident. Brian broke the silence first. "So what exactly are you investigating?" "Drug running." Tom considered how much to share. "Money laundering primarily. But there's more. Corruption, extortion, ties to organized crime. These people have their fingers in a lot of pies." "Here? In Millfield?" Brian looked genuinely shocked. "It's so normal." "That's exactly why they chose it," Tom explained. "Small town, minimal police presence, good access to highways. Perfect for moving money and goods without attracting attention." Brian looked like he was seeing his hometown with new eyes. "And I almost blew your cover because of a speeding ticket." "You couldn't have known," Tom admitted, his anger from earlier fading. "But that aggressive approach to policing, that's a problem. Not just for undercover agents, but for regular people too." Before Brian could respond, headlights appeared again, this time coming from town. 2 vehicles approached, a police SUV and an unmarked sedan. "Looks like our backup is here," Tom observed. The vehicles pulled up and 2 men got out of each. From the police SUV emerged a tall, heavy-set man with salt and pepper hair, clearly the sergeant, and a younger officer. From the unmarked car came a middle-aged man in a rumpled suit that screamed, "Federal agent," and a younger woman similarly dressed. Tom straightened up and approached the suited man. "Dave, that was quick. Happened to have agents nearby," Dave replied, eyeing Brian with undisguised irritation. "This our local problem?" Before Tom could answer, the sergeant stepped forward. "Sergeant Wilson, Millfield PD. I'd appreciate it if you didn't refer to my officers as problems agent." "Reynolds," Dave supplied, not backing down. "And when your officer nearly blows a 6-month operation because he's too eager to fill his quota, problem seems like an understatement." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tom stepped between them. Look, pointing fingers isn't helping. What matters now is making sure my cover remains intact and the operation continues. Sergeant Wilson turned to Brian. What exactly happened here, Kelly? Brian explained the situation, his voice growing steadier as he recounted the events. To his credit, he didn't try to minimize his role or justify his actions beyond the initial reasonable suspicion. When he finished, the sergeant was quiet for a long moment. So you detained an FBI agent, attempted to search his vehicle without proper cause, and nearly exposed him to the very criminals he's investigating? Brian swallowed hard. Yes, sir. The sergeant turned to Tom and Dave. On behalf of the Millfield Police Department, I apologize. Officer Kelly's actions were inappropriate and potentially dangerous. He'll face disciplinary action, I can assure you. Dave nodded, seeming somewhat appeased. We appreciate that, Sergeant. But disciplinary action won't matter much if this operation falls apart. We need to make sure there's no fallout from this incident. Agreed, Sergeant Wilson replied. What do you need from us? Tom rejoined the conversation. First, we need to make sure the people I'm investigating don't get suspicious. If they saw Officer Kelly pull me over, they need to believe it was just a routine traffic stop. Which means Officer Kelly needs to actually write you a ticket, Dave concluded. Make it look legitimate. Brian looked to his sergeant, who nodded. Do it, make it look real. As Brian wrote the ticket, Tom continued. Second, we need to coordinate. If your officers are going to be patrolling near our operation, they need to know to keep their distance. I can handle that, Sergeant Wilson assured him, but I'll need to know where to tell my people to avoid. Dave looked uncertain, but Tom nodded. It's a reasonable request. We can provide limited information on a need-to-know basis. The two younger agents who had arrived with Dave and Wilson had been conferring quietly. One of them approached the group. We've checked the perimeter. No sign of surveillance or the vehicle you described. I think we're clear for now. Tom felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Maybe the situation wasn't as catastrophic as he'd feared. So what happens now? Brian asked, handing the completed ticket to Tom for show. Dave answered, Now we adapt. The operation continues, but with added precautions. And you, Officer Kelly, forget you ever saw Agent Reynolds. Brian nodded solemnly. Understood. As the groups prepared to go their separate ways, Sergeant Wilson pulled Brian aside. Tom couldn't hear what was being said, but from Brian's expression it wasn't pleasant. Dave approached Tom with a concerned look. Can your cover withstand this? Tom considered the question seriously. I think so. The meeting went well. They trust Jack Bennett more than ever now. Good, Dave replied, because we're too close to walk away. But from now on, you watch your speed, understood? Tom smiled for the first time since being pulled over. Crystal clear. As Tom got back into his sedan, he caught Brian's eye. The young officer gave him a respectful nod, a far cry from his earlier arrogance. Tom returned the gesture before driving away. He had a feeling Officer Kelly had learned a valuable lesson tonight, one that would make him a better cop in the long run. But for now, Tom had to focus on becoming Jack Bennett again. The night wasn't over yet, and there was still work to be done. The next morning arrived with the pale light of dawn filtering through the blinds of Tom's temporary apartment. He sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee and reviewing his notes from the previous night's meeting. Despite the close call with Officer Kelly, the operation was still intact. If anything, his standing with Rizzo's organization had improved after delivering those financial models. His phone buzzed. Dave calling for an update. Morning, Tom answered, his voice still rough from lack of sleep. You sound terrible, Dave observed. Thanks for noticing. What's up? Just checking you're still breathing after last night's excitement. Tom sighed. The operation's fine. I don't think our friends suspect anything. Good, because the higher-ups are getting antsy. They want results and they want them soon. Tell them we're close, Tom replied, flipping through his notes. The meeting last night confirmed what we suspected. They're moving money through those shell companies I identified. But there's a bigger player involved. Someone they call the chairman. Dave whistled low. Any idea who that might be? Not yet. But now that I've got access to their banking records, I should be able to follow the money trail. How much time do you need? Tom considered the question. 2 weeks, maybe less. I've got another meeting scheduled for next Tuesday. They're bringing me in deeper. All right, I'll hold off the bloodhounds for now. Dave, Paused. And what about our friend Officer Kelly? Any concerns there? I think he learned his lesson. His sergeant seemed like the type to make sure of it. Let's hope so. I've got someone keeping an eye on him just in case. Speaking of which, there's something you should know. Tom sat up straighter, immediately alert. What is it? We ran a background check on Officer Kelly. Standard procedure after last night. Most of it was unremarkable. Average performance reviews, a couple of minor complaints about being overzealous. But then we found something interesting. His brother-in-law works for Millfield Savings and Loan. Tom's mind made the connection immediately. The bank we suspect is laundering money for Rizzo's operation. Bingo, could be nothing, could be something. Thought you should know. Send me everything you've got on him, Tom said, already reaching for his laptop. I want to make sure last night wasn't more than bad luck and poor judgment. Already done. Check your secure server. And Tom, watch your back. If this thing goes sideways... I know, Tom replied grimly. I'm on my own. Nothing new there. After ending the call, Tom opened his laptop and accessed the secure FBI server. The file on Brian Kelly was comprehensive. Personnel records, performance evaluations, personal history. Nothing immediately suspicious jumped out, but the connection to Millfield Savings and Loan couldn't be ignored. Coincidences had a way of not being coincidental in his line of work. Across town, Officer Brian Kelly was having the worst morning of his career. Sitting ramrod straight in a chair across from Sergeant Wilson's desk, he listened as his superior delivered what felt like the longest dressing down in police history. Reckless, unprofessional, and potentially criminal abuse of authority, Wilson continued, his face reddening with each word. Do you have any idea how much damage you could have caused? Not just to a federal investigation, but to this department's reputation. Yes, sir, Brian replied, keeping his eyes fixed on a point just above the sergeant's head. I'm not convinced you do. Wilson leaned forward, hands flat on his desk. This isn't about quotas or numbers, Kelly. It's about judgment. Something you've demonstrated a serious lack of. Brian swallowed hard. What happens now, sir? Wilson sat back, his expression grim. Effective immediately, you're on administrative duty. No patrol, no traffic stops, no public contact. You'll be reviewing body cam footage and filing reports until I decide you're ready to wear that badge in public again. For how long? Brian asked, unable to keep the dismay from his voice. As long as it takes, and that's assuming the FBI doesn't decide to make a formal complaint, in which case you could be looking at a lot worse than desk duty. Brian nodded, accepting the punishment. I understand, sir. I'm not sure you do, Wilson replied, his tone softening slightly. This job isn't about flexing your authority, Kelly. It's about protecting people, even the ones who make your job difficult. Especially them. Yes, sir. Brian hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I am sorry. I never meant to compromise anything. Wilson studied him for a long moment. Intentions only count for so much. It's actions that matter. Remember that. As Brian left the office, the weight of his mistake pressed down on him like a physical burden. He'd joined the force 3 years ago with such high hopes, determined to make a difference. Somewhere along the way, that idealism had been eroded by the daily grind, replaced by a focus on metrics and numbers that had nothing to do with actual policing. He made his way to the small, windowless room that would be his new home for the foreseeable future. Boxes of body cam footage awaited review, stacked neatly beside a computer that looked like it belonged in a museum. This was his punishment. Mind-numbing tedium and isolation from his fellow officers, many of whom had already heard about his blunder. As he sat down at the desk, his phone buzzed with a text. It was from his sister, Lisa. Everything okay? Mike said you were in some kind of trouble at work. Brian grimaced. Of course his brother-in-law had heard already. News traveled fast in a small department. He typed a quick reply, downplaying the situation. No need to worry Lisa with the details. His brother-in-law Mike worked at Millfield Savings and Loan, where he was a mid-level manager. The job paid well enough that Lisa could stay home with their 2 kids, a fact Mike never tired of mentioning at family gatherings. Brian had always found him a bit smug, but he made Lisa happy, and that was what mattered. As Brian settled in to begin his first file review, he couldn't shake a nagging feeling of unease. The FBI agent, Reynolds, had mentioned money laundering. Brian wasn't an expert in financial crimes, but he knew enough to understand that banks were often involved. Could Mike's bank be connected somehow? It seemed unlikely. But then again, so did the idea of a major criminal operation in sleepy Millfield. The thought troubled him enough that he decided to make a few discreet inquiries when he got off shift. Nothing official, just some questions to satisfy his own curiosity. Maybe it would help make amends for his mistake, if he could provide some useful information to Agent Reynolds. Meanwhile, across town, Tom had changed into Jack Bennett and was walking into Millfield Savings and Loan with a confident stride. The bank was housed in a red brick building that took up half a block on Main Street, its traditional architecture suggesting stability and trustworthiness. Perfect cover for what Tom suspected was happening behind the scenes. Inside, the space was all polished marble and dark wood, with tellers stationed behind bulletproof glass and loan officers in small offices along the perimeter. Tom approached the reception desk with a practiced smile. "Good morning. I have an appointment with Mr. Harrington." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with a pearl necklace and perfectly styled hair, checked her computer screen. "Mr. Bennett?" "Yes, he's expecting you. Third office on the right." Tom nodded his thanks and made his way to the indicated door, knocking lightly before entering. The man who rose to greet him was in his 50s, with thinning gray hair and an expensive suit that couldn't quite hide his paunch. "Mr. Bennett, a pleasure to meet you in person at last." His handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Likewise, Mr. Harrington. I've heard good things about your institution. Please call me Robert, and I hope our mutual friends have spoken highly of us. We pride ourselves on our flexibility with preferred clients." Tom took the offered seat, crossing one leg over the other in a relaxed pose. "Flexibility is exactly what my clients need. Their financial situations can be complex, so I understand." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've reviewed the preliminary materials you sent over. Very impressive work. Very creative." "I prefer to think of it as innovative," Tom replied smoothly. "Traditional banking has its limitations. My clients require solutions that operate outside those constraints." Harrington nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. "Well, you've come to the right place. Millfield Savings and Loan has a long history of serving clients with unique needs." As the conversation continued, Tom mentally cataloged every detail. Names mentioned, financial instruments discussed, the coded language used to describe what was clearly illegal money movement. Harrington was careful, but not careful enough. He didn't realize that Jack Bennett was designed specifically to draw out these kinds of admissions. What Tom hadn't expected was the name that came up toward the end of their meeting. Of course, any arrangement of this magnitude would need Mr. Anderson's approval, Harrington said, gathering the papers they'd been reviewing. "But given your reputation and the potential business you represent, I don't foresee any issues." "Anderson?" Tom asked casually. "I don't believe I've heard that name before." Harrington looked surprised. "Michael Anderson. He's our VP of Special Accounts. I assumed, given your connections, you'd have heard of him." Of course," Tom covered smoothly. "I've heard the name, just never made the connection to your bank." As Tom left the bank 20 minutes later, his mind was racing. Michael Anderson. Could that be Officer Kelly's brother-in-law, Mike? It seemed too coincidental. He needed to find out, and quickly. What had started as a routine money laundering investigation was growing more complex by the hour. If local law enforcement had family ties to the bank involved in the operation, the implications were troubling. Was Officer Kelly's aggressive traffic stop really just bad luck and poor judgment? Or was it something more deliberate? An attempt to discover what the FBI knew? Tom pulled out his phone and dialed Dave's number. "I need everything you can get me on Michael Anderson, VP at Millfield Savings and Loan, and I need it yesterday." The pieces were starting to come together, but Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important, something that could put him in even greater danger than he already was. 3 days later, Brian Kelly sat in the cramped records room, his eyes burning from reviewing hours of body cam footage. The monotony was mind-numbing, but it gave him plenty of time to think. And lately all his thoughts revolved around Agent Reynolds and the investigation that he'd nearly compromised. His phone buzzed with another text from his sister. Lisa had been checking in constantly, worried about him after Mike mentioned his situation at work. Brian hadn't told her the details, just that he'd made a mistake and was doing paperwork for a while. No need to worry her with the truth. The mention of Mike brought his brother-in-law to mind again. Mike Anderson, Vice President of Special Accounts at Millfield Savings and Loan. A title that had always sounded vague to Brian. What exactly were special accounts anyway? Before the incident with Agent Reynolds, Brian had never thought to question it. Now the title carried an ominous weight. Last night he'd casually asked Lisa about Mike's work during their weekly family dinner. Her answers had been normal enough. Long hours, good pay, lots of pressure from the higher-ups. But something about Mike's behavior had seemed off. He'd been distracted, checking his phone constantly, making excuses to step away for calls. Not unusual for a bank executive, perhaps, but combined with what Brian now knew about a potential money laundering operation in town, it raised red flags. Brian glanced at the clock. Almost quitting time. He'd made a decision that morning, one that could either help salvage his career or destroy it completely. He was going to contact Agent Reynolds. Across town, Tom sat in a nondescript van parked a block away from Millfield Savings and Loan, surrounded by surveillance equipment and 3 other FBI agents. The investigation had accelerated dramatically after his meeting with Harrington. Dave had pushed for immediate action, and the higher-ups had finally agreed. "Target is on the move," reported one of the agents, a woman named Patel who was monitoring the bank's exits. Anderson just left through the side door. Tom watched through binoculars as Michael Anderson, now confirmed to be Officer Kelly's brother-in-law, walked briskly to his Mercedes in the bank's private parking lot. In the 3 days since their meeting, they'd uncovered enough evidence to justify full surveillance. Anderson's financial record showed unexplained deposits, and his phone records revealed regular calls to numbers associated with Rizzo's organization. "Follow. But keep your distance," Tom instructed the agent at the wheel. "We need to see where he goes." The van pulled out smoothly, maintaining a careful distance from Anderson's car. They followed him through Millfield's quiet streets and onto the highway heading out of town. "He's taking the route to the warehouse," Tom noted, tension building in his chest. "Looks like the meeting is happening today instead of next week. Should we call for backup?" Patel asked. Tom shook his head. "Not yet. If this is what I think it is, we might finally get everyone in one room." "That's worth the risk." His phone vibrated in his pocket. Tom checked the number, unknown. Normally he would ignore it, but something made him answer. "Hello? Agent Reynolds?" "It's Officer Kelly." Tom signaled for silence in the van. "How did you get this number?" "Your partner, Agent Martinez, gave it to me. Said you might want to hear what I have to say." Tom made a mental note to have a word with Dave about operational security. "I'm listening." "It's about my brother-in-law, Mike Anderson. I think he might be involved in whatever you're investigating." Tom's eyes narrowed. "What makes you say that?" "Little things. His behavior lately. The way he changed the subject when I asked about new clients at the bank. And last night I overheard him on the phone talking about a meeting today. Something about finalizing the arrangement with people from out of town." Tom exchanged glances with Patel. This matched what they were seeing. "Where and when is this meeting supposed to happen?" "That's just it, I don't know exactly. But I heard him mention the usual place and 4 p.m. Tom checked his watch. 3:40 p.m. "Officer Kelly, I appreciate the information, but I need you to stay out of this. It's too dangerous and you're not authorized." I know. I wanted to help fix what I messed up. And if Mike's involved in something illegal, I want him stopped before he hurts my sister or their kids." Tom could hear the genuine concern in Kelly's voice. "I understand. The best thing you can do right now is stay put and keep this conversation between us. We'll handle it." After ending the call, Tom updated the team. "Looks like our timing is perfect. Anderson's heading to a meeting that could give us everything we need." Sure enough, Anderson's car turned onto the gravel road leading to the old warehouse. The FBI van stopped at a distance and the team prepared their equipment. "Patel, get eyes inside if you can. Chen, monitor radio frequencies for any communication. Rodriguez, you're with me. Standard approach, non-lethal options only. These are financial criminals, not gunmen." As they geared up, Tom couldn't help feeling that everything was coming together too neatly. Officer Kelly's call, the sudden meeting, the chance to catch everyone in one place. It felt almost too perfect. But in his years with the Bureau, he'd learned that sometimes cases did break exactly when and how you needed them to. Inside the warehouse, Michael Anderson straightened his tie nervously as he faced the assembled group. Rizzo sat at the head of the table, flanked by his security team. Harrington from the bank was there, along with two men Anderson didn't recognize, one in an expensive suit that screamed lawyer, the other with the hard eyes of someone used to giving orders. "Gentlemen," Rizzo began, "we're here to finalize our arrangement. Mr. Bennett's financial models have proven very effective in our test runs. It's time to scale up operations." The hard-eyed man nodded. "My associates are satisfied with the trial period. The chairman has authorized full implementation, provided the security concerns have been addressed." All eyes turned to Anderson, who cleared his throat. "The situation with the FBI agent has been handled. Our source in local law enforcement confirmed he was just passing through town. Nothing to do with our operation." Rizzo looked skeptical. "You're sure about that?" "Because if there's even a chance we're under investigation, I'm positive," Anderson insisted, though his damp palms betrayed his nervousness. The officer who stopped him had no idea who he was until after the fact. "It was just bad luck," the lawyer spoke up. "What about this officer? Can he be trusted to keep quiet?" Anderson nodded quickly. "He's family, my brother-in-law, and he's been disciplined by his department, taken off patrol duty. He's no threat." "Family," the hard-eyed man repeated, his tone making the word sound like a liability rather than a comfort. "That's either very convenient or very dangerous." Outside, Tom and his team had taken up positions around the warehouse. Through a partially open window, Patel had managed to place a directional microphone, allowing them to listen to the conversation inside. "They're talking about us," Tom whispered to Rodriguez. "And about Officer Kelly," Rodriguez nodded grimly. "Sounds like they think Kelly's brother-in-law has him under control, which means Kelly was right about Anderson's involvement. Let's hope he's wrong about how deep it goes." Inside, the meeting continued. The hard-eyed man, who Tom now recognized as Victor Panos, a suspected crime boss from the city, was explaining the expanded operation. "With the bank's cooperation, we'll be moving approximately $5 million per month through the shell companies. Mr. Bennett's model should make the transfers virtually untraceable." Tom's blood ran cold. He had never created any financial models for them. The Jack Bennett they were talking about wasn't him, which meant his cover was already blown. "We need to move now," he whispered urgently to his team. "They know I'm FBI, this is a setup." As if on cue, the warehouse door burst open and several armed men rushed in, weapons drawn. But they weren't aiming at the people inside. They were looking outward, searching for intruders. "FBI, everyone on the ground now," Tom shouted, breaking cover and raising his weapon. His team followed suit, creating a perimeter around the building's entrance. What followed was controlled chaos. Rizzo's security team reached for their weapons but thought better of it when they saw themselves outnumbered. Panos and the lawyer froze in place, while Harrington simply slumped in his chair, as if he'd been expecting this day to come. Anderson, however, made a desperate break for a side door. He didn't get far. Officer Brian Kelly stepped out from behind a stack of crates, his service weapon drawn. "Don't move, Mike," he said, his voice steady but sad. "It's over." Anderson stared at his brother-in-law in shock. "Brian, what are you doing here?" "You're supposed to be at the station." "I couldn't let you do this to Lisa and the kids," Brian replied. "Couldn't let you drag our family into your mess." Tom approached cautiously, his weapon still trained on the room at large. "Officer Kelly, I thought I told you to stay put." Brian kept his eyes on his brother-in-law. "With all due respect, Agent Reynolds, I couldn't sit this one out. Not when it's family." Within minutes, the warehouse was secured and additional FBI agents arrived to process the scene. The arrests were made without further incident. Each suspect read their rights and placed in separate vehicles for transport. As Tom supervised the operation, he found himself standing next to Brian, who was watching his brother-in-law being placed in an FBI vehicle. "How did you know to be here?" Tom asked. Brian shrugged. "I didn't just overhear one phone call. I've been suspecting something was off with Mike for weeks. When I heard him mention this meeting, I followed him here. Was already inside when you called me back. That was a huge risk. These people are dangerous, I know, but after what happened with you, I needed to do the right thing, even if it meant turning in family." Tom studied the young officer with new respect. "Your sergeant said you had potential. Looks like he was right." 2 weeks later, Brian Kelly sat across from Sergeant Wilson, hands folded nervously in his lap. The FBI sent over their official report, Wilson said, sliding a folder across the desk. Agent Reynolds had some interesting things to say about you. Brian braced himself for the worst. Yes, sir. He said your intervention was instrumental in the successful conclusion of their operation. Said you showed exceptional judgment and moral courage in a difficult situation. Brian blinked in surprise. He said that. Wilson nodded. He also recommended that your suspension from patrol duties be reconsidered in light of your actions. Does that mean? It means you're back on patrol next week, Officer Kelly. But, Wilson held up a warning finger, with a senior officer supervising you for the next month. And I expect you to remember the lessons you've learned from this experience. Yes, sir, I will. As Brian left the station that evening, he found Agent Reynolds leaning against a car in the parking lot. Heard you're back on patrol soon? Tom said with a small smile. Congratulations. Thanks to you, Brian replied. I owe you one, Tom shook his head. You made a mistake, then you made it right. That's what matters. Just remember, the badge is about protecting people, not about power. I won't forget, Brian promised. How's the case going? Prosecutions are moving forward. Your testimony against your brother-in-law will help ensure he gets a fair deal in exchange for information on the bigger players. Brian nodded solemnly. Lisa's still not speaking to me. Says I betrayed family. Give her time. You didn't betray your family. You protected them from what Mike was involved in. She'll understand eventually. As Tom drove away, he reflected on the unlikely series of events that had brought down a major money laundering operation. A routine traffic stop that wasn't so routine after all. An overzealous cop who turned out to have exactly the family connection they needed. Sometimes the most complicated cases broke in the simplest ways. And sometimes people surprised you with their capacity to learn from mistakes and do the right thing, even when it cost them dearly.